Okay, David, this is where we're supposed to choose a side, green or black.
John, my soul is as black as night. Your turn.
I am black for life.
So we're not fighting? I thought this is where HBO wanted us to pick sides and fight and stuff.
Don't worry, I'm sure we'll find plenty to disagree about on the pod, but we seem to agree on one thing. We both really like this show.
The politics, the drama, the lore. It was made for the Lorehounds.
And since we just finished recapping season 1, we couldn't be more ready to defend our Black Queen in the Dance of the Dragons.
And with the season pass option in Supercast, listeners can get early ad-free access to each weekly scene-by-scene deep dive, plus our custom show guide with all the characters and connections. See you in the Lorehounds podcast feed each week for our Dragonfire hot, but probably positive, takes.
The Lorehounds House of the Dragon coverage is also safe for Team Green consumption. Side effects may include a deeper understanding of dragon lore, a hardened conflict with itself, and an inescapable urge to read the book Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. Dragon seeds may experience burning.
Hi, it's Elysia.
And John, we're back for our part 2 of the Acolyte episode 7 discussion. Since we made the choice to spin our feedback discussion off, because there's so much of it. You guys are really enjoying talking about this show, and we love it.
We got theory updates, new theories. I'm going off on a lore dive into the Jedi Code and especially its rules and attachments, and more spoiler talk discussion, including from one of those mythical unicorn Star Wars fans some were worried didn't exist.
I thought that was hilarious. Anyway, can't wait to hear it. Let's get into it all.
For the record, this was recorded July 13th, 2024. And before we get into the feedback, I wanted to also just mention a new interview with Leslie Headland. And I know you don't want her to stop talking about the series, but I love it. This one was with Collider. This is also about episode 7. And there's just a few things she said in this interview that I wanted to pull out because I thought they were very interesting. And one was about the Stranger's reveal, about the fact that a lot of people were like, well, we knew who the stranger was. And so she said, the Stranger's reveal was one that we weren't hiding very much from the audience. It was very Wesley and the Princess Bride. It's more like she doesn't know. What's she going to do? We know. John's holding up a Princess Bride DVD cover.
I happened to be watching that with the family yesterday, so when you said that, I was like, oh, I have that next to me.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's one of my all-time favorites. Well, it was on my essential Elysia list for 11Zs.
Yeah. I think I picked it, and then it didn't get
it.
But that's okay.
But then, Fifth Element got it, which is fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, so did you have any thoughts about the Chimera reveal?
I thought, for me, I didn't want it to be Chimera as the stranger. Mm-hmm. And then when it happened, I was very happy.
Yeah.
I just think that Manny Jacinta did a really great job embodying the character, embodying this chaotic Sith.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really great. I keep wanting to call him Jason Mendoza because of the good place. One day I'm just going to do it without correcting myself and everyone's going to at me. But Manny Jacinta is really doing an excellent job, and it's great to see him have range here.
Yeah, I think that's also what she was saying when I quoted her last time. She was just basically like, the reveal is not that he's the stranger. The reveal is how much you're going to love him as the stranger.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to feel like...
What did you call us? I think you used a special term for us. Y'all are...
Oh, villain fuckers. I mean, guilty as charged. Let's talk about the Forsaken and the Wheel of Time.
Oh, boy.
Well, on the other side of this scale, maybe we've got Saul. And she said about Saul, how do you create a Jedi character that can do something so irrevocably wrong and still, in his heart of hearts, believe that he was atoning for that sin via his love for Osha? And I think, that mission accomplished there, I would say.
Yeah, they did a great job. And again, doing an amazing job appearing young and just going down on those pneuma legs.
And so what she says, so contrasting, we talked about the parallel between Saul and the stranger, as Disney insists we call it. And she said about Saul, what's interesting is that Saul offers her, Osha, a ticket to an institution. It's the institution he's part of. It's the institution he believes in. It's an institution that many, many, many members of the galaxy believe in. So that's not a bad thing, but that's what he's offering her. He's saying, do you want to be part of this great legacy that you've already shown some interest in as a child and that I am living proof of success and happiness and contentment in? And Osha's like, absolutely, sign me up. I'm 8.
Well, it's funny because I think back to when I was in middle and high school and I was getting really into playing music. And you know what the music teachers tried to tell me to do is teach music.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so true, though, that and like when you're a kid, how many other students are just like, yeah, I want to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And not because they necessarily really do. And, teaching is a noble profession. We love and support our teachers. I was raised by a kindergarten teacher, for the record. But it's just the fact of it's really hard for someone so entrenched in something to recommend a different path. And so the Jedi, of course, are like, oh, you come over here. We know what we're doing here. It's a bit of self-validation of your previous choices.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in contrast, she says, what the stranger offers her is, what if the reigning institution is wrong? Have you considered that in your adult life? Like a partner, the stranger says, I've experienced something and I think you would benefit from it. I have a similar history to you, and in adulthood, I would lay it at your feet as a possible toolkit for you to pick up and forge your own life with. Which, yeah, you can see if the previous institution that you were promised would be everything has failed you and let you go, and then someone says, well, I'm just going to give you the tools to create your own path. Yeah, that would be a tempting invitation to the dark side, especially given by a naked Yemeni Yacinto coming out of a pool.
I know. But as an 8-year-old, I don't know about that.
As an 8-year-old, she's hearing this as an adult. Yeah, the new
Okay. I see what you're saying. I was like, I don't think he's using the same tactics on May when he finds her, but I hope he's not using the same tactics.
Yeah, we don't know how old May was when she met him. I'm curious.
That's
I hope
true.
we find out in the finale.
I want her to have been living a feral life, just cast away for a while and
just alone on Brendock. Oh god.
She talks to her tattoo.
Yeah.
She talks to her marking.
She just has those jelly flies pinned up all over her hut.
Wilson.
Oh god.
She's like, Osha, I used to talk to you all the time on Brendock.
Yeah. Maybe that's how we find out that she sees the Force dyad too. Although I guess it's not technically a Force dyad if they are two halves of the same whole, literally. That's not quite what a Force dyad is.
The power of 0.5.
And speaking of that, so Hedlund also said, also part of the intrigue of them being a consciousness that split into two bodies, what that means to me is that they are patient zero of the attempt to use the Force to create life. It worked and it failed. So they are only half as strong as our midichlorian Jesus. They are fractured. So I hope that I know that the thing is the people who need to hear that, the people who are crying how dare you take away the thunder of a later character, they're the ones who need to hear that, but they're also the least likely to.
So are we now explicitly explaining how
they did it in the show
midichlorian Jesus is born?
Oh, well, no, because she can't. Leslie Hedlund does not have the rights to. She does elsewhere in this say, well, some people say that he was created by the Sith. Some people say that he was just created by the Force. And so she doesn't have the answer to that. She can't answer that. But she's just saying, in her mind, these girls, don't worry, they're not meant to be as strong as that character because they're split in half.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I'm just curious if we're doing some kind of, because we did the whole prequel redemption arc with the Clone Wars cartoon, or what do I call it, the repair project? And now we're in the middle of the sequel trilogy repair project, rehabilitation project. And I wonder if this is just one last box that they want to tick for the prequel trilogy rehabilitation arc. Because I know a lot of people did not like the fact that we got midichlorian Jesus as the origin of that character.
I mean, I think what we're seeing is it ties into that, but it also, I think, is part of the rehabilitation project for the sequel trilogy arc in terms of generating life and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in the Jedi's favor, though, in their defense, she points out that they just like to study virginses while we see the witches and the Sith using virginses.
Hmm.
And she says about the witches that it's not unheard of to utilize the Force in a darker way, but again, having noble intentions, it's not unheard of. There are, I think, probably 1 million people online who will disagree with me on that, but I don't know what to say. I've watched Star Wars. That made me laugh when I read it.
Yeah, I can think of characters later who are definitely dark side users who do decent things. Even
Right.
in, I'll even go in authorized timeline order.
Hmm.
I can recall some situations in the books, I think, in the High Republic books, where you see them go like, "Oh, but that's a dark side user. How do they heal?"
Right.
Like, clearly there is something that allows a dark side user to heal and do perhaps things that would normally be
Right.
attributed to the light side.
I mean, I think the difference is that, and the Sith would say this, or most dark side users, I think, would say this, is that the Jedi restrict themselves to only one half of the color palette, and they're like, we're going to paint with the full palette.
Right, right. Which fair enough. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
So it's not that the dark side users restrict themselves from light side Force usage. It's the other way
Right.
around. It's that the light side users are like, no, we couldn't possibly. And they're like, well, then I guess you're not getting your dead kid back or whatever,
Ugh.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like they don't force push and pull, right? Like they do
Right.
all the Jedi moves plus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, which is kind of really terrifying to be a Jedi and be like, okay, I have to fight with one hand tied behind my back, and I have to be so good that I can fight someone with both.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And you know what the secret is?
What's the secret?
I'm not left-handed either. I watched Princess Bride.
Yes.
Now it's in my head.
It's such a good movie. Yeah, that's gonna last the ages. Although, sorry, just slight aside, a few years ago, Healthy and I showed it to some younger friends of ours, and none of them appreciated it. They were all like, "This is cheesy. Why are you guys so obsessed with this movie?" Like,
That's the
what?
point.
Yeah.
This is my age now showing. I think I watched it for the first time on VHS on a coach bus going on a field trip.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
that's how I saw it for the first time.
I honestly do not remember how I saw it for the first time.
Do they
Probably.
even still have TVs on coach buses? Because I don't think I've been on one since high school.
Um. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they show like community like movies or something anymore, because I would definitely normally just bring my own tablet.
Right, exactly. But like when we were kids, that wasn't a thing.
Right. No, yeah, there was definitely community
Smartphones had
movies.
started when I was in high
Mhm.
school,
Mhm.
but it wasn't like everybody had one. They would still put on all these, movies for everybody.
Yeah. No, I remember. I mean, I didn't have smartphones. I had cell phones started when I was in high school, but my mom, she got me one and she was like, "Here, this is for emergencies and stuff." So I was like, "Okay." Put it in my pocket, turned it off, and then got a very upset mom one day, like, why is your phone off? Like, you said it's for emergency. She's like, leave it on.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
That's really funny. No, when I got one of those cell phones with a full keyboard, that's what changed my life.
Right.
I could text all the ladies then.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
No, the ones that I'm talking about in this case are like the, original Nokia bricks.
Okay. Yeah, I had one of those too.
Yeah.
That was my emergency phone.
No. All right. Shall we jump into the feedback?
I'm not done yet. I had a Razor next. I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The Razors were cool. Flip phones. Yeah.
Oh,
Flip
yeah.
phones are
Bring
making
back-
a comeback. My mom
I know.
has the Samsung one that folds in half.
Is it good?
Yeah, I mean, she likes it. So I should also say my mom used to work for Samsung, so she always we all have Samsung phones.
Fair enough.
All right. So let's start off with first we had eHope who wrote in, or eHoop, I guess I should say, who wrote in with John. You called it some wild theories last time. So we got some theories after episode 6, and then we got an updated theory just after just this week. Okay. So I'll read after episode 6 and I'll leave the next one to you. So after episode 6, eHoop said, okay, I'm no longer convinced Vernestra is the Stranger's boss. How about what we're seeing is actually a schism between Darkside users. Vern and Darth Biceps are estranged. Vern is still a big bad, but she's using her position in the Order to hunt her rivals. My OSHA idea becomes less convincing with each episode. Also, Star Wars wouldn't do that. Responding to us saying that Star Wars wouldn't do the mother-daughter sexual tension. It's too Game of Thrones. Ehope says, I'm less than 100% convinced, and inserted a gif of a famous kiss between brothers and sisters.
Okay, all right, Ehoop. You know what, George? That's
says it's not a spotless record of not fishing in the family pond, but yeah,
that's not George Lucas being an incest lover. He just is an inconsistent writer who probably didn't decide that was his sister first.
Yeah. And it is a rather chaste, this is not like brother sister in a tower going at it like the first episode of Game of Thrones.
Right. Nobody's getting pushed out of windows here.
Right. Well, yeah, not for that reason at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things we do for love. All right, you want to read Ehoop's episode 7 theories?
I like to think Ehoop just had a jog and an energy drink and then just slap this on the keyboard. All right, so here's my new theory. Vernestra and Coral are cult leaders who will cause a mass Jedi fall. Season 2 will essentially be following the exploits of fallen Jedi light whip gangs marauding the galaxy. More light whip now, Ehoop.
I support your more light whip now movement.
Yeah, that would be cool. I would love to see more of that.
Yeah, I love the theories, Ehoop. Please keep them coming. They're delightful. I'm going to be picturing the marauding light whip gangs. And now I need to know, are they riding those, what are the vehicles that we saw in Boba Fett?
I don't remember. I blocked out that show from my memory.
People were complaining that there was a group of people who were riding on, what do you call them? Vespas, kind of, basically.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah, wasn't one of the Yellow Jackets people in that?
Yes. I didn't dislike it as much as other people, but I need to know.
That whole series was a mess. That's I'm notably very positive on most of Star Wars, and even I couldn't defend that season.
There were
2 good episodes.
For me, that it was the weakest one, and of course, we should say to anyone who hasn't seen it yet that this was the COVID product. So there were strange things they had to do in the finale. Like in the finale, you see, instead of having like everyone meet together, they all just have little face-offs in groups of 2 because of COVID restrictions, basically. So it makes it play out a little weird.
Add it to the Wheel of Time pile.
Yeah. I think Book of Boba Fett got hit even harder by the COVID stick.
Yeah, seems like it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have a voicemail. I asked Sebastian Zavala, who's a movie critic and writer, editor, blah 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 in Peru. I asked him for his thoughts on this episode. Shall we give it a listen?
Yes.
Okay, so the Acolyte episode 7. I'm not a hater of the show, by the way. I've enjoyed quite a bit. I think, like most people, I enjoyed episode 5 the most. It was pretty impactful and visually spectacular, and all the fights were awesome. Episode 6, I thought, was dramatically very interesting, like a small respite between all the action. Episode 7, on the other hand, I'm not so sure about it. There were things I liked, of course. All the small references to the lore and the prequels. The fact that they mentioned the word virgins was pretty amazing for a prequel fan, or an episode 1 fan especially. The M-Count, of course, which is midichlorians. Apparently they're not willing to say the word midichlorians, but we know what an M-Count is.
Say
so
it,
that's
you
fine.
cowards.
And yeah, the whole flashback thing, I think that in theory was pretty cool. I mean, I liked seeing Kalnaka in action, even though he was, possessed or whatever. He was being controlled by the magic of the witches. But overall, I thought this flashback came a little bit late. It was too little too late, to be fair. I thought it should have been shown earlier. Much earlier, to be honest. I think that if they showed it earlier, we would feel a little bit more for the characters, especially Saul and the other Jedi. And it felt a little bit repetitive, considering we already had like one flashback to these events. Obviously, not the whole event, and obviously not the same perspective, but it did feel a little bit repetitive, which I didn't like, to be honest. I think the acting is really good. I think Master Soul continues to be a highlight. It's a tad disappointing that he's more or less the one to blame for everything that happened, which is interesting. I thought it was interesting too that Indara was pretty much, I mean, not completely blameless, but she was a little bit more, less to blame, so to speak, for everything that happened. Kelnaka still is a disappointment to me as a character. I think that a Wookiee Jedi was so filled with potential that the fact that he wasn't very well handled by the show, it is disappointing. But I thought, as always, the lightsaber choreography was awesome. I think that all the moves that are being, that involve the fights are pretty amazing. I think that they're dramatically potent and they look really nice, which is obviously much better than what happens in other Star Wars shows, which is amazing. But once again, I think that even though there's a lot of deep cuts and Leslie Headland and the rest of the scriptwriters clearly know their lore and know everything that happens in the prequel era, especially, and stuff like that. And they know how to use it, and they know how to include all these Easter eggs without them calling too much attention to themselves. I do think that, once again, this came a little too late. I mean, I think for it to have been dramatically and emotionally potent, it should have come earlier, and it's really weird also, the fact that it comes as the penultimate episode of the show or of the season. By this moment, we should be going forwards. We should not have to. We shouldn't need this kind of obstacle, like in the narrative. Like going back once again in the penultimate episode does feel like an obstacle. It does feel like a stop, and instead of us going forwards. So I do think that they're gonna have to solve a lot of stuff in the final episode, especially in the present, with Kimir and the rest. So I'm not sure how they're gonna be doing that, which is interesting. Because they could have used this, the next to last episode to do that, but they didn't because they did a flashback. So we will see. So for me, it's a mixed bag. I do think it's my least favorite episode of the show so far. I hope the last one doesn't end up replacing it. It wouldn't be ideal, of course. I don't think it's horrible. I think the acting is really great. I think the lightsaber combat is amazing. I think there are some really good ideas, definitely. I like the whole gray morality of the Jedi, the fact that they're presented not necessarily as the bad guys, but deeply flawed people. And, I think it's very consequent or coherent to the way they are presenting the prequels, which is amazing. But I do think that this came definitely too late, and it didn't feel as emotionally potent as it could have been. So yeah, that's that's my opinion. Let's see what you think, what the rest of your listeners think, or your guests. And yeah, thanks again for the invite.
All right, so what do you think about the placement of this flashback episode?
I thought it was good. I have seen the sentiment on our Discord too.
Mm-hmm.
And may I add, this is the kind of disagreement that I want to have on a show like this. Not like we shouldn't have Black women leading shows.
Right.
So I appreciate that take. And I think that's just going to be a preference thing, right? I think for me, if the sin would be to bring this night into next season, to make me see another flashback next season. That would be too much for me.
Okay.
But I think you wrap that night up this season, and then let me move on to the next mystery. I'm happy.
I mean, I wouldn't hate getting more perspective next season, but I think, the mystery element of it shouldn't necessarily hang, but we can get it colored out more later in the future.
Sure.
But I think that the placement of this episode was necessary, because I think that if this had been earlier, because all of the stuff in the in the Chimera reveal episode, would it have hit as hard if we were already thinking like, oh, well, Saul, you did something questionable, I think we need to settle into that comfort of, seeing Saul as the good guy as the, the Jedi with the best of the Jedi and things like that, so that we get this kind of nasty surprise toward the end like this. And then yeah, I just think that the reveals of the episodes before this and the reveals in this episode would have undermined each other had it been shown in a different order.
Okay. I'm with you on that. I do not really mind the placement of this episode. I think that you're right. I think that this was intentionally structured for a reason, and I think it's working.
Yeah. Yeah. But Sebastian, I really appreciate your thoughts and insights. And also, yeah, I know a lot of people, as you said, John, are feeling the same way.
Yeah. And again, this is the reasonable discourse, guys. We've done it. We've defeated the fandom menace on this podcast.
All right. Shall we take turns with the rest of these?
Sure. You give me an easy one. Reader Reborn.
I was going to take. I was going to take.
Oh,
no, I'm just kidding.
I see.
I'm just
All
kidding.
Right. Go ahead.
No. You go, Reader Reborn.
I can be Marilyn. Hello, I'm Marilyn Arpakila.
No, go ahead, Reader Reborn.
Small thing, but I think May survives the bridge and Osha survives the prison ship crash because they probably unconsciously turn into the black smoke. I like this. I like this a lot. When I saw this, I was like, oh, that's good. That's good stuff. I hope so.
Yeah,
I mean, we did see May involuntarily become some black.
Right. But that's my question is, can they, I mean, of course, yeah, he's saying that they can't control it. But my question is then, like, can they even do it involuntarily, or was that only happening to May because she had already forged the link with Anastasia in terms of getting that spiral on her head?
It's a good question. I don't think we necessarily need Osha to have survived in some magical way either.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we did have that. I would be fine if they were just like, she lucked out, right? She landed the right way.
Well, I mean, I think not even lucking out. Like, she was smart about it. She was like, okay, I'm going down. What am I going to do? She's like, well, all I can do is strap in. And we did see, they showed when that ship came into the planet, it didn't crash as much as skidded. So that definitely saved her.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was the other thing? What was her job? Tech mech or something?
Mech
neck. I can't keep you straight. But I think the fact that she ran a high risk in space job probably had something to do with it too, right?
Right. Yeah, you saw her assess the situation. She's like, I'm going down. What's my best chance?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
She knows what happens when you run out of oxygen.
Yeah. Okay, so Marilyn says, hello, Elysia and John. I'm afraid I have to object to the showrunner's notions about attraction. Jackie was definitely one of my favorites, and Chimere is definitely not. I have no time for the, quote, evil sexual domination as attraction trope. It's done too much harm over time. I can, of course, appreciate his physical attributes, but at the end of the day, he is a violent, me first, screw you if you disagree with me, whiny dude. His Chimere side is also part of him, not just his supposedly sexy dark side, Sithy persona. And he blames the Jedi for who he currently is. However badly the Jedi have behaved, at the end of the day, he's responsible for his own choices. I have compassion for his suffering, and I loathe his choices. Nothing attractive there for me. He's a gaslighter.
I gotta say, Marilyn comes in going, I'm not gonna let some podcaster named Elysia call me a villain fucker.
No, that's fine. Marilyn, you are exonerated. I am not. No, but I mean, of course, all of this is true. She continues, he's a gaslighter, a manipulator, and an abuser, and he holds no attraction for me. That doesn't mean that he is not, quote unquote, redeemable, but it would have to be a whale of a character arc given what they've given us so far. And I really don't think they have any intentions of redeeming him, but I could be surprised. I think that I don't think they're planning to redeem him, and I kind of don't want him to. I don't know.
No, I think there's a difference between explaining someone's, explaining and redeeming, right?
How they
explaining
are,
and excusing. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want the exploration. We're not going to get this season his full backstory or anything, but I look forward to that. That's one of the things that will keep me hooked for next season.
Right. See, that's the thing. That's why I'm saying I want to let go of that night, is that I want more of that, right? Like, I do want flashbacks to something, not that. I think this night is getting a little overplayed here,
Right.
Play a different song on the album.
Yeah, maybe it'll be the meeting between him and May from different perspectives next season or something like that.
Yeah. 10 years into it. May introduces her to her OSHA tree. She like carved OSHA's face onto a tree.
Like I call it Wilson. I mean, Oshie. Marilyn says, fun to be reminded of Shadrach, Mesrach, and Abednego. Sorry, I'm going to say this. Shadrach, Mesrach, Meshach.
You got it.
Meshach, and Abednego. See, the thing is, it's early for both of us now.
Oh, yeah. See, I fooled you into doing an early podcast.
Yeah.
If listeners don't know, this is because I said, why don't we just record at 3 a.m. my time?
Yeah, so it's 9 a.m. my time, which is like a normal first thing in the morning time for me. I don't know how John does it.
I just woke up at like 2:45 and I was like, you want to knock this out?
Yeah. All right. So she says it's fun to be reminded of these three who survived the fiery furnace in the Hebrew story. In your discussion of what Chymere's name might actually mean, my first thought was some might call me Tim. Thanks, Monty Python. This concept of distracting and confusing the Jedi with pain, their own or others, was exactly what a certain Sith Lord did to a certain hero to lure him into a face-to-face confrontation in the second ever Star Wars movie. Hope that's sufficiently non-spoilery. Perfect, Marilyn. And finally, speaking of spoilers, I entirely agree with John. While I often get lost in the confusion of new names and places and details that wash over me in the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast, it's your podcast and you can not spoil if you want to. And as a certain Lorehounds co-host would say, always to my delight, anyone who doesn't like it can kick rocks. May the force be with you, with them, and with everyone.
David?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Rocks,
I was like, I'm used to the Davidisms now. I'm like, wait, who said that?
All the best,
or was I cranky one day?
No, David's the one who likes to say kick rocks.
Fair enough. That is a very Gen Z coded sentence. We didn't kick rocks in the 90s. We only, they kicked rocks in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, we kicked cell phones that were dead. I don't know.
We still play with sticks, though, for the record. Did you have hit clips? Can I ask you that? It's 3 a.m., so I can talk about anything now.
What does it have? What?
Did you have hit clips as a kid, or did you? Oh yeah, okay. So this is like the peak of American consumerism. Let's take a step back for a second. Hit clips were designed for kids. They were essentially a tiny cassette player that had proprietary tiny cassettes that only played like the chorus of hit songs, and they were hit clips. They cost a lot of money. They had 30 seconds of a song. And they had a million ads on TV all the time.
I do not remember this at all.
This was early 2000s.
This was, so I was in college in the early 2000s, but still, you would think I would see the commercials. There was a special little player for them?
You had a special little player, and then the hit clips themselves were designed to be on a keychain because they were like these tiny little like Chex size cartridges that you put in. And then there was Video Now, which was the music video version of this. Again, 30 seconds.
Does ring a bell because I can see like the Video Now logo in my head.
Yeah. Anyway, adventures in consumerism. When I think back on that, I'm like, no, that's capitalism at its core, right? Because that is just, you're breathing an air of the product without actually getting it, but paying more money for it.
Right. I mean, but this is like plays into the NFTs of today. Or I remember before that, in my time, there was the Beanie Baby craze. We love to just invest value in something that we can collect. We just love it.
Yeah. Look,
we're raccoons.
I'm not against collecting, but let's not do it with hit clips. There's TikToks on it. You should look it up now. People are just like, was this a fever dream?
This is this is like a whole new world to me. Is this am I Mandela affecting this? Like
all right. Now that I've derailed your entire podcast with my 3 a.m. thoughts.
No, the people need to know about hit clips. I needed to know about hit clips.
I hope somebody writes in about hit clips. I hope I've awakened a dormant memory in someone. Someone
has a drawer somewhere. They're like, oh
my God.
So Marilyn concludes this first part with P.S. Regarding Kymir's possible whale of a redemption arc, I suppose he could always be the father of the twins or even the brother. What do you think?
Nah, boo.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
I just don't want it. I want them to be related to this virgins.
I think I don't think they have a father, because I do think that they're thinking of like the birth of our midichlorian Jesus, who notably, well, I mean, as you pointed out at the beginning, we still don't quite know what happened there. So apparently we're getting, I'm super excited for the explanation this week to find out what we find out. Do you want to take, so Marilyn sent another email in last night responding to our first half of this episode podcast. Do you want to take that one?
Sure. Hello, John. Oh, hello, John and Elysia. Good pod episode. As always, I found myself suddenly thinking in terms of Soul as a social worker. I'm sure that you've heard cases both good and bad of social workers taking children away from homes because the homes are deemed to be dangerous. Of course, so much depends on the values that one bases one's decisions on. When the home is an unfamiliar culture with seemingly strange practices, it is difficult to make a judgment that honors the values of the home community in question. What is abusive to one culture may not be deemed so in another, and yet I have to think that violence is violence, whatever culture one is dealing with. That is, just to pause there, that is a great nuanced point, Marilyn.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, we cannot be excusing violence based on culture. At the same time, I think this is why we want things like community policing, right? Like, bring people from the community to be the social workers and the police officers and whatnot of that community, so that they have a better understanding of the norms and what's going on, and they can read situations appropriately and not make bad assumptions.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
The Jedi
So
aren't exactly community policemen.
Yeah, we needed Saul to talk to someone. Well, I mean, it's like I said, we needed him to knock on the door instead of scaling the mountain. And
Right.
Like, talk to people like, hey, what's going on in here? You got a virgins? We're looking for virgins. You got some kids?
What's the virgins vibe? Social workers have codes and boards to guide them and advise them. But at the end of the day, for the one making the decision, it has to be a profoundly difficult one in many cases. And you don't always have time to consult the board. Of particular challenge are the situations in which the social worker is a member of a dominant culture, and they're dealing with a family who are members of a subordinate culture. Much harm may be caused even with the best of intentions. Such good may also come. If there are any social workers among listeners, I would love to hear your insights on this particular framework. This whole paragraph reminds me of the First Nation issues in Canada, right?
Yes. Which actually, I have to say, so I responded to Marilyn's email and I said I especially liked the social worker point. And she responded, and she actually specifically brought up the First Nations issues where she lives.
Right.
And yeah, about kidnapping, for anyone who doesn't know, about kidnapping children and taking them away from their families and forcing them to go to boarding schools where their language and cultural practices were forbidden. And this happened to my own great grandfather in Oklahoma. But yeah, it's interesting. She did specifically bring that up in her response.
And if we're going to talk about something happening today, the Uyghurs in China right now,
right,
similar situation.
And, although they're doing that to adults too. They're luring adults back from Europe and then putting them in these internment camps. But anyway,
that's pretty crazy. That's awful. Mm-hmm. All right, everybody, go Google the Uyghurs.
Yeah, wait, it's not
spelled how you think.
Yeah, Uighur, I think. Yeah.
When I first learned about that, I said to my wife, "I want you to guess how you spell Uyghur." and she's like, "Wait, why?" And I said, "It starts with an O."
Well, it's also, I mean, because this is a Chinese word, so we're just translating it into Roman letters,
Right, we're transliterating in a terrible way. Yeah. Anyway, the point is, speaking of frameworks, Marilyn says, it seems to me that George Lucas was borrowing freely, but superficially from several without a complete understanding of their meanings. Other than Zoroastrianism, I know of no religion that claims there is a need for evil to exist. Free choice, yes. Evil, no. Unless one thinks of the Manichaean, I might be saying that wrong, but anyway, splinter group who were declared heretical or non-canon, if you like, Christians. If you have a founder who preaches humility, You can't blame them or their message if their followers don't follow that teaching, even if they keep the name. In a discussion about how the witches were influencing Kelnaka, I don't think that their mind control included body control. How could it? When they were neither Wookiee nor Jedi. I think they were controlling motivation and emotion, and that they died from the backlash of the release of their power by Indara. I'd also like to note that I don't think we know who killed Kelnaka yet, do we? Or are we to assume that it was Chimere? And finally, I wonder if May's survival depended in part on the presumed fact that her sisters are in fact the same being. If Osha survives, so does May. What do you think? Looking forward to the final episode of the season. All the best, Marilyn.
First of all, just about the mind control, including body control, I think, so I know people are like, stop talking about science with Star Wars, but I can't help myself because Star Wars actually doesn't contradict science as much as people would think, fires in space aside. But so in this case, what I saw it as, if you control someone's mind, if you control the neuro functioning in their brains, then you are controlling their physical movements. You're basically playing them like a puppet.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I guess my question on the podcast was, do they have access to his expertise, to his training?
Right. And I think you're right in saying probably not. I don't know that, although we see like they could theoretically, like we saw Anasea, she knew things about Torben, what he wanted, his desires.
Right.
So theoretically, they do have that same access with Kelnaka. I doubt his desire is to kill Torben, unless Torben was really annoying for the last 7 weeks.
But also, I think we don't really know how effective of a Jedi Kelnaka was in terms of lightsabers, right? Like, not every Jedi is going to be the best fighter.
Right.
In terms of lightsabers. Perhaps he is really good at hand-to-hand combat, and he is really good at we saw him really elegantly grab the blasters from people and then break them in half. Maybe that's his strength with lightsaber fighting, because of the lack of agility of Wookiees is not his strength, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's why the others are able to hold him off. Except Soul goes mano-y-mano, which shocked me. I was like, you're going mano-y-mano with a Wookiee?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess what was he going to do? And then thankfully Indara comes in at that moment.
Yeah.
Because it did take 2.5 of them to take. I'm sorry, I'm calling Torben a half because he's on the ground at this point.
One of my favorite.
He impressively held him off.
Yeah. One of my favorite lines in all of Star Wars. I'd sooner kiss a Wookiee. That can be arranged.
Yeah, so the Kelnaka comic is going to be set before all of this, and that's coming out in September. I'm going to see how quickly I can get my hands on it, but when I do get to read it, I'll definitely do a little mini episode to just let people know what of interest you might take from it.
There you go.
And then also, so about the sisters being linked, and if one survives, both do. I think there could be something there to that.
Yeah, I think that's right. Maybe as long as one remains alive, the other can live. So you have to kill them both at the same time, which seems weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to read the next one too, because then this is the one that's triggering my lore dive for this episode.
All right, let's do it. Darth Kenshin writes in. Says, hi all. See, I don't know if I could trust Darth Kenshin because they're a Sith, Can't trust a Sith. Hi all. I really enjoy your coverage of the Acolyte and just had
and then
one
goes and
quick point.
compliments us. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Darth Kenshin. I think you're lying though. You hate the coverage. And just had one quick point and 2 quick questions. Regarding the Force leaving someone after a while, that was actually canon in a movie. Can't quite figure out your spoiler policy, but you'll know what I mean. A character who went away from the Force for a long time and tried to use it and did so successfully, creating a Force projection of himself, but ended up dying. The director of the film likened it to a drug user who kicks the habit, then goes back. It puts such a strain on your body, and you're not used to it anymore, so it can be damaging, even fatal. So it's not like Osha can't access the Force anymore, but it's probably just too much of a strain on her body to be able to do it without any severe consequences. All right. Wait, you want to chat about that for a second?
I mean, yeah, I'll go with that. Like, I think we also see, other characters who willingly step away from the Force, stop using it, and then it's not that they put themselves in danger by reaccessing it per se, but it's hard. It's like when you, like any skill, you stop exercising it, and you get a bit rusty, and then in their case, it might take some effort to even connect to the Force at all again, which is what we seem to have been seeing with Osho.
Right. Darth Kenshin continues saying, my question is about the Jedi Code of No Attachments. First off, what's the actual depth of that? When we see Jedi die on screen, in film, or on TV, their Padawan or Master always has an emotional response. Is that against the Jedi Code? Where do they draw the line? Lastly, who actually made the Jedi Code? I just also wanted to say, the Jedi do not practice what they preach literally ever. So,
I
like,
mean, humans are hypocrites in general.
yeah. I mean, yeah, we love cognitive dissonance. We're always like, you're being cognitively dissonant. And like, that's what like half of our society is built on.
Right.
I've noticed several times on your coverage that there are similarities to modern religions being inflexible and alienating. People like the Jedi do with their harsh rules. However, in the case of modern religions, those beliefs are typically based on an ancient text believed to be the word of a supreme being. So whether or not you agree with it, I would argue the inflexible nature makes sense to adherents of the religion and is justified by it being the word of God. Do the Jedi believe in a singular deity who set these rules, or are they all purely man-made? Thanks again. That's interesting because I've done quite a bit of reading on several religions. I don't think that's a universal belief that scripture is, the literal word of God. And I don't think that it's a universal belief that it has to be inflexible. I think that many religions, many more modernized religions, believe that the rules can evolve with society. We can have a better understanding of how to interpret those writings that were by humans. Perhaps some people will say they different religions believe in divine inspiration of the text rather than divine words,
right?
And so I don't want to lump all religions together. That's my one thing I want to clarify. I'm not saying let's all get our pitchforks and go for people who are practicing religions.
No, of course not. Yeah, and of course, if the Jedi, it's not a it's not a monotheistic religion, I would say. George Lucas does call it a religion. If they have any gods, I would say they are. I mean, the god is basically the Force itself. So no, the Force is not transcribing information. You could say maybe the Celestials, the Father, Daughter, and Son. Maybe they are their gods in a certain way. But the Jedi Code itself it was written by humans, we think. So basically, it's a set of rules that evolved through the centuries. And maybe we'll see its creation in the Jedi Prime movie that's being planned for 25,000 years before this point in the timeline, which is about the founding of the Jedi, the dawn of the Jedi. I have to bring up, there's a canon source book for a role-playing game called Forces of Destiny, and this source book is called Nexus of Power, and it says that the modern code was revised, so not originally created, but the version that we hear about was revised by a Jedi Master named Odon and that does come from legends, but this is what brought it into canon. Odon by the way, is a Draethos, who I encourage you to look up this species, Draethos, and he was a Jedi, but they are a scary looking species. They kind of look like, their heads look like horses' skulls with just like this protruding mouth with just teeth on top. But anyway, so he was basically, and he wasn't doing this alone. He was working with others, revising this code. So like they were kind of not so much transcribing from God, but then like, I called him maybe the Moses of Star Wars, but it's not like he's taking it down from God. He's looking at what's there and is like, how do we turn this into what become the sacred Jedi text? So Odon he did live more than he lived for more than 1,000 years, between about like 4,000 and 5,000 BBY, so long before this.
Okay.
And then we see those sacred Jedi texts, they get added to over the centuries and they're passed down, and they do turn up in the sequel trilogy. But the interesting thing about this Nexus of Power book that I cited is that it's also especially about vergences. It's one of the best sources of information on vergences in canon.
Animism. That's where I'm going with this. The more I think about this, the more I think about what you're describing and how the Jedi describe the Force and whatnot. I think that the closest analog, and animism isn't really like a religion, it's more of like a type of belief, right? I think, the Force animates everything, it's throughout everything. I'm like, I think that's kind of animism as far as a belief system.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess it's true. I mean, I guess I was thinking, like, we're talking about what are Jedi gods. In some ways, it's the midichlorians, although a lot of Star Wars fans would hate that, so disregard if you do.
Oh, gosh.
I also want to say, so when I cited the Jedi Code a few episodes ago, but I actually was specifically reciting one part of it, which is called the mantra of the Jedi Code. So the mantra, again, was the one that I cited was, there is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. And this version of it does come from Legends, and it was brought into canon by my favorite Star Wars novel featuring a certain Night Sister. But what's interesting is that I think that was released in like 2016. And that same year, they released a Kanan comic set around the same time. So Kanan's a Jedi character who'll show up later, set around the same time. But the Kanan comic has a different version of this, which I think kind of contradicts it. So the Kanan version of it is emotion, yet peace, ignorance, yet knowledge, passion, yet serenity, chaos, yet harmony, death, yet the Force. So like that version to me is saying that the other one is saying, you must suppress the dark side so that, you can be this good Jedi monk, which we've been talking about being dangerous. And this other version seems like, well, you're targeting serenity and peace, but we acknowledge passion and emotion as well.
More passion, more energy. Something, as you're reciting that I'm thinking of is the Jedi are really good at being in denial.
Yeah.
Like, I think that the fatal flaw with Jedi ideology is that the Jedi, they, rather than embrace and guide human emotion and the human experience, they kind of deny it.
Yeah.
No attachment, not healthy attachments.
Right.
There is no death, not we become one with the Force, and that's part of death.
Well, they do say that. They do. Well, like Jackie said that in this show. She says it's lovely to watch someone become part of the Force, and then she becomes part of the Force.
I don't believe her. I don't believe her. Well, then she became part of the Force, so it doesn't
matter. So what is specifically said about attachment in the Jedi Code is that you can't marry, but romantic and familiar love is not expressly forbidden. Obi-Wan, an important Jedi character, says this at one point. But giving into attachment is basically considered giving up being a Jedi. So compassion is deeply encouraged, though. And we know that George Lucas, he is a practicing Buddhist, and he based a lot of these concepts on Buddhism. So in Buddhism, you have the Four Noble Truths are kind of a central tenet of Buddhism. So basically, to paraphrase the Four Noble Truths, 1, suffering is pervasive and inescapable. 2, we cause suffering by clinging to people, to things, to concepts about ourselves. 3, suffering can end. Nirvana is possible. 4, the path there is wisdom, spiritual practice, and living ethically, otherwise the Eightfold Path. So does that sound like the Jedi dogma doctrine to you?
Yeah. I mean, it's somewhere in there. I think I think that they're to accept death as a natural part of life is a different thing than there is no death, right? And I think that's where I get into issues with the Jedi. Like I think that the Buddhist teachings are more about accepting what you cannot change, and the Jedi's teachings are no, we're going to reject some things that we cannot change.
Right. So I have to say, I got into the Buddhist philosophy at some point in my adult life because I have an anxiety disorder, and it really helped me with it because it just the concept of not clinging to things, um,
Mhm.
just kind of letting things, nothing lasts forever. You're not going to keep that pair of earrings forever. You're going to lose it.
Mhm.
You're not every friendship is going to last forever, things like that. And just being able to say, okay, am I just causing myself more harm by clinging to whatever it is that's giving me anxiety at the moment?
Yeah, and I think that this idea of, letting go of attachments in in a more healthy way is something that you see across religions too. I mean, the Musar movement of Judaism, I forgot which movement of Christianity is very similar in tenets to Buddhism. I want to say Franciscan, but I could be wrong. Uh, but my point is, I think this is something that like people around the world have yearned for,
Right.
is the ability to let go. And Buddhism is most known, I think, because Buddhism as a macro religion, and I know it's debate, is Buddhism a religion? Would Buddhists consider themselves part of a religion, or if anyway,
Well,
point
it's
is,
been explained to me that there's a philosophical element, and then there are people who have like a real religious practice of it
yeah. Although then that
because they
opens
would
up the
consider it a
question.
religion in, those who practice it in a religious way consider it their religion.
Yeah, but also that begs the question, do you need a deity to have a religion? Anyway, I'm not going to get into theology tonight, but my whole point is, I think
But they
that this
have
is something
deities. But anyway,
no, I'm saying if you don't consider it your religion, do you need it? Do you need a deity to consider it a religion? Yeah. Anyway, my point is, uh, because there's a debate whether the Buddha was holy or not, a god
hmm
or not, or just an enlightened person. Anyway, within Buddhism. Anyway, you're pulling me into this theological discussion that I would love to have because I
when we
think
have
that
more
stuff's
time.
super
Yeah.
fascinating. But this is not that show.
Right.
But my point is, I do think that the reason that the Jedi Code resonates with people when they watch Star Wars is because it feels like that yearning that people have
hmm
in the real world that manifests in all these different ways. And I like that. I think that's good
Yeah.
writing. I just think that the Jedi take it one step too far.
Yeah. Well, I would counter to what you said before that Star Wars is always an opportunity to talk about Buddhism because George Lucas wants it that way. But
Fair
I
enough.
did
Fair enough.
I did pull out some quotes and examples from Star Wars history about this idea of attachment to give us a better idea of how different, because it does definitely, we do see the different characters, they take their own interpretations of it.
Right.
So during the High Republic era, so set like about 100 years before this, and actually, the book "The Rising Storm" is actually set right after the Great Hyperspace disaster we talked about this week.
Mm-hmm. I'm
Um,
reading it right now, actually.
oh, okay, great, yeah. So I don't know if you got to this part, but Jedi Indira Stokes says, "Love, experiencing and embracing joy, affection, and even grief is part of the light side. However, a Jedi couldn't be a slave of those emotions."
See, I like that. That's a lot more reasonable than what you just read.
Well, I mean, but there is like different people interpret it differently. So in Master and Apprentice, which is a book that's set at the beginning of the Fourth Era, which is especially about Qui-Gon Jinn, um, another Jedi says to Qui-Gon, casual sex is not forbidden. It's basically like, no, like it's okay that I'm sleeping with so and so because it's casual. It's not like I'm not breaking my
Oh my
attachment vow.
god.
And
We're literally
Qui-Gon,
gonna do no strings attached.
well, Qui-Gon is like, no, that's not how it works.
It's just funny. Like I think of like that wave of early 2000s rom-coms about where
hmm
like, oh my god, we can finally talk about one night stands in Hollywood. And it just feels like what Qui-Gon's looking at. He's like, no,
Yeah.
this is a fad.
Yeah.
But then you have another Jedi given the permission to have sex and to basically have a family because of the threat of extinction to his species, right?
So it
The
is all subjective.
Yeah, it is Yoda.
Yeah. And we have another very prominent character says in the prequel trilogy, so someone, his love interest asks him, "Are you allowed to love? I thought that was forbidden for a Jedi." What does he say?
Attachment is forbidden. Wait, I have to put on my best voice. Attachment is forbidden. Possession is forbidden. Compassion, which I would define as unconditional love, is central to a Jedi's life. So you might say that we are encouraged to love.
That is definitely someone looking for a loophole, but
Dude was trying so hard to get into those chambers, those royal chambers.
Yeah. I think that Wikipedia has a nice summary on this. Here's one paragraph from there. They say attachment was the inability to accept change as a fundamental characteristic of life, to accept death as a natural part of life, the inability to let go. Feeding into fear of loss and greed, leading to jealousy, attachment was selfish, a shadow of greed, and thus a path of the dark side of the Force. Therefore, attachment was forbidden for a Jedi, who had to train themselves to let go of everything they were afraid to lose, to renounce all attachments. Thus, they could be compassionate and loving and caring, but not be possessive and grabbing and holding on to things, trying to keep them frozen in time, accepting the transitional nature of life. This allowed them to love the totality of life unconditionally without selectively choosing individual life forms to become selfishly attached to.
This sounds like a lot of explaining away, guys.
My counter is that, yeah, it's hard not to form a parent-child relationship or a sibling relationship, given the structure of the Master-Padawan relationship in the Jedi Order. So, yeah, we see our favorite Jedi failing this particular attachment test over and over again. And Saul is part of that proud tradition now.
And we kind of glazed over it before, but Marilyn brought up attachment and more brought up attraction, right? Attraction in relation to like dominance. And to me, I don't think that the show is saying that dominance is attraction. I think Chimere is pulling on lust, which is different from love, right? Chimera is trying to play with lust, whereas the Jedi are okay with love, even though they have concerns about attachment. And again, we've talked now ad nauseum about how it's all kind of messed up. Like it just doesn't make sense. Their whole idea of what attachment is does not make sense in practice. And every single generation, there are Jedi who struggle with this and kind of disprove that it's a real thing.
I mean, yeah, for me, it comes back to I am notoriously religious skeptic. And this for me is always the issue with religions for me is that, you know, there are these absolute rules in a lot of cases that just, if you're not flexible about them, they just don't make sense a lot of the time to me. Like,
which is weird because sometimes the Jedi are like that, right? Like sometimes the Jedi are flexible. The Wayfinders, right? Or not Wayfinders, the Pathfinders. Is that what they're called?
Yeah,
the ones who are allowed to go off on their own.
Right. The Wayfinders. Yeah. Sorry. Wayfarers are the people who help navigate. Yes. Wayfinders.
Yeah. All right. You know, get it together, Lucasfilm's books. But my point is, like, sometimes they are really flexible, and then other times they're just completely rigid, and it does not make sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, but I think that is just how institutions are and how people are. And that is exactly what they've been exploring. Yeah. Well, shall we take a quick break and then come back and dive into the rest of the feedback?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, and we're back. So, diving back in, Wandering Not Lost says, just watched. That was the best episode of Star Wars I think I've seen. My 10-year-old disagreed and said it was good, but not that good. He said Ahsoka's storyline in Clone Wars was better.
You both have stellar taste. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great one. Look forward to Ahsoka. Are you going to do Davy Mack?
Davy Mack. I love Davy Mack. Great guy. All around good guy, Davy Mack. I love how this episode really complicates all parties involved. I have no problem believing Torben would be as torn up as he is and even kill himself all these years later. Dude was bored and wanted to go back to Coruscant, and that led to him acting rash and running back to the Coven, which resulted in the entire Coven dying. Plus, who knows what kind of residual effects Anasaya's being in his mind left on him. Kelnaka certainly had become obsessed with spirals after being possessed by the whole Coven, or maybe he just read Uzumaki. I don't know what this is, do you?
No, I don't know Uzumaki.
Right in, David Mack.
Yeah, let us know. David Mack, by the way, lives in Japan, so.
Right. But no one comes out of this clean. I guess Kelnaka did the least amount of harm, and the harm he did do was not of his own volition. Though maybe he felt guilty about a whole bunch of people being killed in order for him to live. I also loved the start of this episode and having the Jedi just doing a mundane surveying mission.
Yeah, I agree. I loved that. I did like that they were just like, yeah, what did the Jedi do when they're not, fighting in battles or whatever, saving the galaxy? They're just out surveying, like, oh, let's document this Force Virgins thing.
Right. Yeah, and what's really sad about Torben especially is that Torben wanted to go back to Coruscant for his relationships, right? To be around people he knew and not isolated anymore.
Yeah.
And because of his actions, he ends up in a Barash vow and completely isolated from other humans. Or now the other humanoids, I should say, in this world.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but he isolated, but then, like I said before, he picks like a heavily populated place. Like, I would rather do it Kelnaka style. Like, let's just go live in the woods, make some mystery stew, and like study animals or whatever.
We record the podcast from the woods now.
Yes. If I could. Okay, Rocky Zinn says, I liked Mother Anasaya. Her power seemed pretty cool. She wanted to let Osha choose, and that is a good thing to do. The Jedi definitely are being exposed for their morals and ways of the Order that are not so righteous. Interesting how Saul was so determined to have Osha as a Padawan. Tallman being Torben, was so set too on going back to Coruscant and was manipulated in a way, I think. Yeah, definitely. Not so much by Anasaya, but from his perspective on things. I agree. Just weird that Saul was drawn to Osha so much. Was it the force of that world or their virgins that was driving Saul that way? Also makes sense as to why the four Jedi would be conflicted with their emotions about what happened, trying to move on, covering up a lie that killed so many people. I don't think Indara meant to kill the witches. She was trying to save Kelnaka, and the rest was the deaths of those witches. And the result was the deaths of those witches. That fight was great, though, with Kelnaka. Seeing a Wookiee Jedi fight was awesome. Maybe we can get Buryaga on a live-action show or movie with him fighting. So Buryaga is a Wookiee Jedi character from the High Republic books. That would be terrifying. A Wookiee who can already rip your arms off with Force powers. A Sith Wookiee would be even scarier.
Yeah.
Yeah, oof. I said, there's a Wookiee who shows up later in the timeline called Chrysanthemum, and he's really intimidating. He's not Force sensitive, but I would love to see a Sith version like him,
Yeah. It's we don't get enough variety in this. I mean, one thing I'll say that this show has let me down a little bit on, is that they said it was from a Sith perspective, and I don't know if we've gotten that fully. I don't know if it lived up to that promise.
Okay. Yeah, I know that that's something that Bob has been saying. So Deadeye Jedi Bob has been doing also weekly breakdowns on his YouTube channel. And that's the one thing he said is that he hoped for more dark side perspective in this show.
Yeah. Like it's there, but it's not prominent.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that. I'm going to see what happens in the finale.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
You want to take Sub-Zero?
Sub-Zero writes in and says, I really love this episode. It filled in a lot of the gaps. I heard/read some say that they would have preferred episodes 3/7 back to back, but I kind of like the placement. But let's not have any more eps without Chimere. He was missed. Agreed. I don't think any of the 4 Jedi were evil by any means. I think on balance, they were still more on the good side to varying degrees. History is littered with people who thought they were doing the right thing but end up causing great harm. Intent only takes you so far. Consequences are what truly matters. Sol was definitely flirting with the dark side. He seemed barely in control of his emotions. And the creeper vibe was 100% intentional, even down to the way he was skulking around. And going down on those Numa, like I'm just saying.
There's nothing suspicious about that.
Yeah.
I respect someone with a good appetite.
No, I just think it's funny because I think you're right. I think you said this. It's like a college vibe, right?
Right.
Like, yeah, I'm at the dining hall. This is an all you can eat Numa leg buffet.
He's like, I got Wookiee cooking for me.
Yeah, my meal pass is lit.
Yeah.
All right, great physical acting by LJJ. Sol wanted/needed a Padawan so bad it was clouding his judgment. I couldn't believe it when he lit his saber after telling Torben to exercise restraint and just straight up murdered Mother Anasea. He was the most guilty of the bunch.
I mean, I see why he, at the moment, it was like a panicked reaction. It wasn't like the malicious, I'm going to kill her. It was just like, what's going on? Boom, stab. And then.
Well, fear is the path to the dark side. Anyway.
Yeah.
I was wrong about Indara. I thought she would have been the one who tried to rip the kids away, but she wanted nothing to do with it. She was in damage control mode the entire episode. That move she made on Kelnaka was straight out of the Matrix. So dope. Her telepathy powers were so strong that it broke the bond held by 40 plus witches. Yeah. So that moves Vernestra up the board in terms of who might be Chimera's master. And also Mother Coral, who was MIA at the end. Although I never got the vibe that Coral was strong enough or devious enough to be a Sith master. She seemed like more of a linear A to B kind of gal.
Yeah.
Then, sorry. Yeah, you want to respond to that first?
Yeah. So, so it sounds like we're not going to find out what happened with Coral this season. That's going to be a season 2 thing. And I'm wondering if we're not going to, maybe we should temper our expectations about finding out who Chimera's master is in the finale, because again, Chimera wasn't supposed to be as prominent this season until the undeniable power of Manny Jacinto on screen, basically.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, I'm fine with, we all just want somebody to show up and be like, hey, I'm Tenebrous. But I think we should not expect that in the finale this season.
Yeah. And then some silly commentaries from Sub-Zero. John Lorehound is going to have to revise his song to May Did Start the Fire. Although I have questions about how small a fire like that could make a whole complex blow up. Whatever was in that lamp was arson-grade accelerant.
Yeah. This is why I want another revisit, because I want more clarity on that. And a couple other things.
There's a lot to do next week to land this plane. I really hope Leslie and Co know what they're doing. This obsession with 6 or 8 episodes is baffling to me. I completely agree. You know what? We were at 22. I've recently been revisiting old shows at 22 episodes.
22 is too much.
I agree with that. 22 is too much.
12 is good.
12 is good. 10 is good. 8 is too few. I don't know why we went to 8. Bizarre.
Yeah. It's a budgeting thing, basically. They're like, okay, well, because this was a super expensive series. I think it cost $180 million to produce, and that wouldn't include then marketing costs and all that. So yeah, it's very expensive, and they're basically like, okay, you can divide that up into 8 short episodes. That's where it comes from. It's not I don't think it's definitely not that Leslie Headland's I don't have more story to tell, or I want the episodes to be short and few. It's just the reality of production, and this is how now studios plan and budget their shows.
Yeah.
But we get better. We get better special effects now. We get more on site, on location, and
yeah. Everyone's got an answer, don't they?
All right. So Abby says, I'm going to say something deeply unpopular, as I know people like him for some reason. My suspicions were correct, but even I didn't think that it was him all along, the main culprit, the very bad juju, all the creeping around. So he is so set on wanting a Padawan that immediately assumes the worst of this family just to justify himself and his actions, not listening to the voice of reason of Indara, seems she is only culpable of the hushing up part and maybe the losing control of her colleague's part. It would be him in need of feeling a lot of guilt, not Torben, who got roped into going along and basically just tried to stay alive after Sol just shot first without asking any questions, without understanding anything, only jumping to conclusions. Mother Coral was another who was all too ready to go on the offense and who manipulated May to do so too. But wasn't that just their way to protect the coven? Misguided, sure, and we saw the consequences. Yet, it all goes back to creepy Uncle Sol. They should have ended each other, and maybe everyone else would have been okay. Damn. Isn't it just good writing, though, the tragedy of it all? Kind of everyone is to blame in one way or another. They are all reacting according to their personalities and beliefs.
Yeah. I think Mother Anastasia could have communicated better. However, I think that Sol probably is the main culprit. I think that's probably right.
I mean, I think that that's what this episode is communicating, but it doesn't mean that like he's a bad person for it. He just was. Obviously he wanted a Padawan, and for some reason, he saw Osha and he's like, this little girl, she needs me to rescue her.
Yeah,
and everything else came secondary to the story he created in his own head the second he saw her and saw Coral yelling at her.
I wonder if he created that in his own head, or did someone put it there?
Yeah, I mean, so we saw him looking in on, he saw the interaction by the Bunta tree with Osha and May, and he saw Osha say to May to like basically not torture the jellyfly, even though Osha had done it a second before. He didn't see that part. So I wonder if that's the moment where he was like, okay, this one who said, be nice to the jellyfly, she's my new daughter.
May didn't start the fire.
At least not on purpose.
Yeah. John, member of the pod, I almost said friend of the pod, but member of the pod, says no matter how powerful, they were like 8 years old. When May called out for her mama after the fire was completely out of control, that hit me. Children as pawns in the games of adults. When Osha called out for her mama, that hit me. Sol is to blame. Torben got violated and he was still a Padawan, so I understood his actions. But Sol was just, so nasty. Was that a good rendition of...
Yeah.
Or is it Wookiee? Is it
yeah. I still can't do the Wookiee thing well.
The whole... Oh, wait. That wasn't a good Wookiee. I'm gonna go back. All right. That's a little better. The whole... They might be in danger. Like, dude, who are you to make such declarations? Who are you to decide that, Sol? Who gave you the right to question things like you have no understanding of Sol? So, do we all now still believe that Indara was really killed by May? Listening to the pod, I remain staunchly in favor of a rendition of May didn't start the fire. I think that's what I'm going to go with. I still want didn't, because I don't think she started the fire.
Right. May didn't start the fire.
I'm just going to say the fire because it's not going to roll off the tongue a little bit. Can I just also say, I think part of the reason that, and look, Sol had confirmation bias from the beginning, but there were some concerning things that May said when they were interviewing her for, the Jedi enrollment. And that was largely because she's a kid and sometimes kids have trouble understanding nuance in statements, right? Like, and she kind of heard, oh, you sacrifice yourself.
Right. You have to sacrifice a part of yourself. Yeah.
Right. And that's, I could see a Jedi saying something like that, right? Like sacrifice a part of yourself to the Jedi Order. But this is just a case of he hears something and he's like, oh, I see a giant pit and I see a girl saying she's going to sacrifice herself.
Right.
She might be in danger. I don't think that that's a completely unreasonable conclusion to come to. I don't think the reaction should be climb a fucking wall,
a mountain,
and break in. Yeah. I think he, like you said, Elysia, he should have just knocked on the door and been like, all right, look, she says she wants to sacrifice herself. For peace of mind, can we just observe the ceremony to make sure you're not about to like kill these kids?
Right. Or even just, before they broke in the first place, just be like, hey, So we're just like around here doing some work. Can we come in and talk to you? Can we
Right.
talk to you about our savior, the midichlorians?
Right. It's a problem.
Yeah. So yeah, Marilyn also. This is not in response to Jean specifically, but Marilyn said on the Discord, and I thought that this was a good one. How about no one is to blame, though everyone is responsible?
Everyone started the fire.
Everyone started the fire.
Doesn't roll off the tongue either. Yeah.
Hmm.
We're going to have to go with May.
All right. So Paradise says, I'm not ready to just chuck Saul and the rest of the Jedi into terrible, awful people pot. And I think people would do well to remember this show is trying to show the gray of it all. So Saul did think the children were in danger, and perhaps rightfully so. We still don't know what exactly was going to happen. The actual Jedi Council said, nah, leave them alone, before finding out about the quote-unquote twins' origin. If it wasn't for realizing they are part of, or possibly origin of, the Virgins, and Torben rushing off to the Coven, Saul may have been reined in. He didn't look ready to rush into it until he was told to chase after Torben. I do wonder if he's gone with Kelnaka instead of. I do wonder if he had gone with Kelnaka instead, how things would have turned out. So just pausing there for a second, so we did get clarity, and I think that this was properly conveyed too, that they are not the origin of the Virgins. The origin of the Virgins is like whatever that hole is that the witches are praying to.
Right. The giant hole.
Yeah.
You know.
But their creation was definitely enhanced by the power of that Virgins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree though that Torben, Saul already crossed some lines, but the final lines that were crossed were they were started by Torben rushing off to be like, oh, I can solve the problem right now and go home. But I also think that Mother Anasea, she kind of, what she did to Torben by possessing him before that and like playing on his desires, his homesickness, she kind of set that up by accident.
Yeah, she did help goad the situation into existence.
Yeah. So Paradise says, don't think the final confrontation happens if Saul didn't have to chase down Torben. Torben also ignited his saber first, if I recall correctly. To be honest, couldn't tell 100% what happened between Saul and Mother Anasea. He seemed confused himself with how he killed her once she turned into the smoke monster. Still left with a lot of questions and not a lot of solid answers.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope more answers are coming. Not through flashback. I could do. Look,
bring all the flashbacks.
You can have
flashback to the pregnancy in the middle of the episode. Yeah.
You can have one more flashback of that night, though. You're permitted one more.
I disagree. You can have as many as you need to tell the story you want to tell.
No, I don't think so. I think I write the show now.
Do you want to do
Moisture Farmer says, mind transference, creating life using the Force, of Virgins, all things that track very closely with Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious, or at least their interest in it. Maybe the Sith become entangled because they're also studying Virginses, find out about the Coven and what they can do, and pursue it themselves. D-Plague. It's funny. Darth Plagueis.
That's what his friends call him.
That's, yeah. Hey, D-Plague. He figures out midichlorian manipulation. Sid figures out... Sid. This is funny. Sid figures out...
Okay, we have to edit some of this.
you bleep that right out.
So basically, we're talking about the line of Sith that continues from here. So we've already talked about Plagueis might be a Sith Plagueis is a Sith that emerges in exactly this era, an important one, and then takes on later Darth Sidious, who is the main Sith of the next era. And then, we've talked about the fact that there's a Force dyad storyline.
Right. I think the Jedi, just as Torben said, thought they were doing the right thing. I can see the hater internet going on all week about the Jedi being evil and Soul being horrible, blah, blah, blah. I think they all seem to be doing what they thought was right at the time. Soul was a little too emotional for a Jedi, especially a fully trained one. Wikipedia says that a Virgins in the Force can sometimes warp Force-sensitive people's connections to the Force and their abilities. So I wonder if that's an ingredient in this bowl of foobar stew. Also, I thought it was kind of ironic that Torben wanted to go home because he was so bored and then ended up taking the Barash vow in silent meditation for 10 plus years or whatever it was. Yeah, that's exactly what I said before.
That's maturity, I guess. And then you kill yourself. No, that's not maturity.
Open questions for finale. How did May survive the fall? What happened to Mother Coral? When, how, and why does Chimere become involved? Vernestra, how does she know? When did she find out? What does she know? When did she find out? Was she helping keep it from the council? Is she secret Sith, etc.? How were the twins created? Why are they one consciousness in two bodies? How does that work? Which coven? More info, please. Why were they exiled? What is their name? Where are they from? Etc., etc., etc. What is Unknown Planet, and why keep the name a secret from viewers?
Well, I can already tell you that we're not going to get the answers to some of these questions. We are promised the answers to how the twins were created and what is the nature of their creation. But we already know, yes, it's one consciousness in two bodies. They clarified that this episode. How that works and how they were created, that's been promised in the finale. I hope there's more information about the Witch Coven. Would be great to see how May survived the fall, but some of this is definitely waiting for next season. Like, I don't think we're going to find out what happened to Mother Coral until next season. I don't know if we're going to see May and Chimere meet this season. That might be one for next season. So, I mean, yeah, just we have to keep in mind that they have a particular mystery that they're setting up for this season, which is pretty much what happened that night and like who are these twins? What is the nature of these twins? And then I think, yeah, stuff like who Chimere's master is, like I said, I think that's going to be a season 2 thing.
Fair enough. And that's just off the top of my head. I don't think they can answer all those in a single finale episode. And if they answer only one, which ones are most pressing? I'm concerned there's going to be too much unresolved. Hedlund has said she doesn't like to keep big mysteries hanging between seasons. I'm less optimistic this week than last that they'll be able to wrap this up in a satisfactory way. I really hope they do. I like the show and I want non-Skywalker saga content to continue getting made. I want a strong series. Plus, I want to know exactly how old Mundi is to the day. Otherwise, I'm going to riot.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even exactly know how old Vernestra is. I guess we do, actually. No, we do know that because we know when she was born. Yeah, I mean, Kiadi. Yeah, let's see. How long do Syrians live? Tell us next season. But that's not.
Fair enough.
All right. So the rest of it is about Spoilergate. So I hope that this is a discussion that people are finding interesting. I'm finding it an interesting discussion because, it's just a good reminder that, there's a diversity of opinions in this audience, even though we're all here because we want to know more about Star Wars and explore this. We see that there's a variety of perspectives and experiences. So, I find this very interesting. So, okay. The first is from, so this was on Twitter from Tech Funk Dub. And Tech Funk Dub says, just my 2 cents. I do feel the spoiler rules on Acolyte are a bit draconian. However, as you seem to love just about every IP I do, and you do such a good coverage when you get into the lore, I am not at all concerned and won't stop listening. Okay, well, thank you for that feedback and for the compliment.
I like that it almost went to only a Sith deals in absolute, but it really got into some more nuance there. So thank you. Oh, it's my turn.
Yeah.
Hubert. Firstly, I feel horrible. I left a 3-star review out of spoiler-free frustration. I do, however, appreciate you addressing my feedback, and you're absolutely right. You cover Acolyte the same way as Hot D. But when John mentions things and then gets bleeped, I feel like I am Osha and Master Soul is never going to tell me what's going on. Anyhow, I get the format, and I appreciate the work that you put into coverage.
Yeah, so I said that I wrote back and said that I would reveal the bleeps as much as I can that I could think of. And so I'm thinking, I can remember 4. I don't know if you have any to add to this pile. The first one was was maybe the very first episode. And the bleep was, I don't even remember what it was about. I remember at the time thinking like, this is not such a important thing. Like, it's not such a huge spoiler, but it was funny to do the bleep just to kind of introduce the concept. So sorry about that if that frustrated anyone. Like I said, I don't remember exactly what it was about, but I do remember that you said Obi-Wan, and I remember that because that's what you call your son on the podcast.
Yeah.
The second one, I can't remember if I bleeped this or just took it out, but it wasn't even a Star Wars spoiler at all. It was a Wheel of Time spoiler. And you were comparing a character from the Wheel of Time to, a dogmatic character who might not be dark side in this show. And I took it out because it's a character who's going to play a prominent role in season 3. And I didn't want of Wheel of Time. And so I didn't want,
Fair
we have a lot
enough.
of Wheel of Time listeners. So, the third bleep I remember is last week when you said something about a blind Jedi. You said their name, and I bleeped the name and then said afterwards that was about a blind Jedi. And I think I was actually protecting most of the audience listening on that one because I will be straightforward about that. That is not from a live action thing, the character you were referring to. So if you don't know who the blind Jedi is, and no, we're not talking about the monk who appears in live action, who is a guardian of the will, not a Jedi. Then if you don't know that, then that is part of one of the most satisfying story character arcs in all of Star Wars. And I think because it's not live action, a lot of people don't know it yet. So if you don't know who it is already, then you are who I'm protecting on that.
Justice for... I did it really long so that you could do a nice long bleep on me.
Yeah, lots of lightsaber sounds. And then I also, this week, I bleeped myself for saying the name of a character in Ahsoka. And as someone who listens to punk music, if you don't know who that is, don't worry about it. But I basically, like, when it comes to titles like Ahsoka, or there's another TV show called Obi-Wan, like, there's an inherent spoiler in that. I'm not going to pretend that Ahsoka's not an Ahsoka, or maybe it's all about her Force ghost. But I will try to protect the identities of other characters that show up because I don't want you to know who does or doesn't die in stories before that, things like that. Yeah. And so those are the 4 that I remember. I don't know. Do you remember any others?
I don't remember. Well, I don't. I rarely listen to podcasts that I've recorded because then I have to listen to my own voice and I have to cringe.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I hope that the flashback episode, this was written before the flashback episode. I hope that scratched the itch for you in getting the answer from Saul finally.
And Hubert, thank you for the self-reflection and your opinions are valid and valued no matter how many stars they come with.
Yeah, no, like I said last time, I do really appreciate the weighing in. I appreciate the diversity of opinions. I also want to thank NVMCB, Puck Gremlin, and Mark A, who left really nice reviews this week. I've read them. I really appreciate them. I'm not quoting them because they didn't specifically bring up the spoiler policy, but yeah, that really helps when people leave reviews saying that they're enjoying it, and it helps other listeners to find it. So yeah, it's lame, I know, for podcasters to be like, please don't leave negative reviews, but it is appreciated when you email the negative feedback, just because I'll be perfectly honest, I'm trying to build an audience. So
yeah, and there is something about Star Wars that brings out the negative reviews.
Right.
Like I've said this for a while. Like, our Star Wars podcast has our Star Wars specific feeds on the Lorehounds has by far the lowest average rating, and I don't think that we cover Star Wars any worse than any other shows. No. And I just think that it's so funny that Star Wars is so graded on a curve.
Well, I know. I mean, there were people who were like just leaving 1 stars for anything that said Acolyte, and that happened to the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast as well. Like, I noticed it says Acolyte in the title for SEO reasons, and there were just there was just
this
suddenly a
the
batch
on the Lorehounds feed, though. I'll say that.
Okay. Well, in this case, there was like a batch of 1-star ratings. I'm like, well, I have a feeling I know what that's about. I'm not going to take it personally. Those people didn't leave reviews.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like, even on the Lorehounds YouTube channel, because we just auto post all our podcasts as basically just thumbnail videos on YouTube, and it's just funny. Like, somebody commented, they were like, "This Star Wars is terrible," and I was like, "I don't make it, buddy. Like, we just talk.
We just talk about it. Yeah."
What do you think? You think Leslie Headland is browsing the reviews of this podcast?
Yeah, exactly.
Bob Iger is going to suddenly be like, you know what?
Oh,
The Lorehounds podcast is doing poorly in the rankings, so I just have to cancel.
I'm going to stop making Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah. Make Star Wars more white because the Lorehounds, they're going down in their rankings.
So I'm going to shout out. There are 2 other reviews that were left, and they did say something about the spoiler policy. So first, John G4 left a 5-star review. Thank you so much. Said, I love this podcast, especially how the spoiler rules almost make it its own story. Keep it up. So just for the balance of things. And then Ryuko098 left a 4-star review and ended it with, P.S. I don't feel strongly either way about the unique spoiler policy, but it's a cool concept to see the stories from their perspectives without rehashing all the more well-known stories from the Imperial era, and gives us an interesting perspective. So cool, smiley face. Nice range of opinions. You want to take the next one?
Sure. Matthew F. says, I didn't want to leave a negative review that would impact your search rankings, but I have to say, I think that per the negative review, the strict spoiler policy really does a disservice to an otherwise very enjoyable podcast. I would strongly suggest that you allow knowledge of the mainline movies to be discussed. It's just so awkward to maintain the conceit that the viewers don't know the basic core plot. It really distracts from otherwise fantastic content in my experience. Of course, tastes can vary, so this is just one data point. Thanks for producing fun content and being a positive voice in the fan community.
I mean, yeah, so the spoiler policy, I think no one was complaining about this until we did the Lorehounds crossover, and I think that is the main thing. Is it's mostly people. I mean, someone correct me if I'm misrepresenting you, but for a lot of people, I think it was a surprise that something was being covered in the Lorehounds feed that way, whereas in the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast, it's just inherent to the structure of the podcast, to like the point of why I'm doing this podcast this way.
Yeah, I get you. Well, I also think it's the first like on-screen thing that you're talking about on this too, right?
Right. Like Young Jedi Adventures, nobody is watching.
Something.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
So when people are excited to talk about a new thing, they're like, "Oh, I want to talk about all the things I know."
Right.
And so that might be the reason that suddenly it came out of the woodwork. But to compare it, Hot D is one thing, but to compare it to something that I think is even a closer analog is Rings of Power. Like we know what happens in that whole Second Age story. And if you go back to our Rings of Power coverage, which I kind of want to redo season 1 because I didn't know how to podcast back then. But even on season 2, I know my plan is I know a lot about what's going to happen. And I'll talk about what happened in the Lord of the Rings, but I'm not going to talk about the other stuff that happens in the Second Age. I don't want to spoil things that might happen in the show.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of the idea. And I think it's going to get a lot easier too once we get into the next era and we're talking about Anakin. I said the name Anakin. And then people are going to be less eager about like, why aren't you talking about Anakin? Which we are. Yeah. We're talking about Anakin's midichlorian Jesus. I told you that's how he enters the story. I acknowledge the existence of this important character we're going to talk a lot about. I'm not going to bring up what happens with him until we get there because I just think it's more fun to like take a moment and look at the current place we are.
I think you could get Matt Lanner for an interview. I believe in you.
That'd be cool. All right. So Moisture Farmer says, listening to the new ep now and the discussion of feedback about not mentioning characters, events, etc. that haven't happened yet, I was mixed on that initially, but likening it to book reader versus viewer for things like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings makes a ton of sense to me. I think my resistance was primarily, who doesn't know who Luke or Yoda or Vader are? These things are so pervasive in pop culture. If you're listening to this, you have a passing familiarity. Stop being coy, laughing emoji, goofy face emoji. But I am not a reader of George R.R. Martin or Robert Jordan and immensely enjoy those shows. So Robert Jordan is Wheel of Time, and George R.R. Martin, obviously, Game of Thrones, Dance of Dragons.
Hey, no, we call him Gurm
House
over
of the
here.
Dragons. Gurm. And I support his right to say how many legs a dragon has in his books. Anyway, recent blog post. Moisture Farmer says, my enjoyment has been enhanced considerably for the House of the Dragon and Wheel of Time podcasts, especially by Lorehounds with Wheel of Time for what it's worth. And it might not have been if it was full of open acknowledgement of plot and character moments yet to come. Just wanted to say I appreciated both the listeners' feedback and your openness to it with the discussion. It helped me better understand my own point of view with a reminder about the importance of diversity of opinion and how it can further our understanding and enjoyment of all this great content. Kudos. And then TATMAITM. There are too many acronyms in this message, LOL. Initialisms. Yeah, for the record, by the way, we have talked about Yoda a lot. He's already 700, more than 700 by the time of the Acolyte. So
he's around.
Yeah, anyone who wants to know more about Yoda species, we go into that, especially in the Young Jedi Adventures episodes, and we're definitely going to be talking about Yoda and Yaddle in the episodes, which you may have already listened to if you're listening to this later, where we break down the different phases of the High Republic books. But yeah, Luke and Vader aren't alive yet at this point, so we can say those names. Those are characters people might have heard of, but we won't spoil their stories yet. And yeah, and thank you for the Wheel of Time love. Yay! Next season, you actually get to hear me. I'm being released from the White Tower dungeon.
I think David is, from what I've heard from him, I don't think he's interested in covering season 3. But I'll let him decide as we get closer.
Yeah.
In 2026.
All right. Do you want to take the last one?
Yeah. Oh no, I scrolled up. I've made a huge mistake. All right, here we go. Caitlin. Hi, Elysia and John. I am a newish Lorehounds fan and an even newer Star Wars fan. I found the Lorehounds while looking for Wheel of Time content and have been a listener ever since. Well, thank you, Caitlin. It's so nice to see people coming in for Wheel of Time. It's a smaller community, but it is a hearty one.
It is a passionate community.
Yeah. I'm emailing in response to some of the spoiler feedback you've gotten, in particular the feedback that said, do you really think people are watching Acolyte without having watched the rest of Star Wars or something to that effect? Well, I am here to say that I am literally that person. After dating a Star Wars superfan for 4 years, I have finally just watched all 9 main movies. I started May 4th, 2024 and finished June 30th, 2024. I have seen 0 other Star Wars content until now. Acolyte is my first live watch, and it was released on June 4th, 2024. So yes, I was in fact watching Acolyte without having seen all of the main movies. I realized that I'm probably an extremely small minority and that most people have already seen Star Wars by the year 2024. Either way, I really appreciate the spoiler restrictions as someone who hasn't seen most of the franchise. I love the amount of lore provided, and I find it digestible and interesting even as a new fan. I tried to listen to other podcasts that felt a bit careless and even elitist in a way, though I do not expect other podcasts to cater to us few newbies. I really appreciate the way your structure helps those who are just starting our journey. Best, Caitlin.
Vindication.
That certainly take your victory lap, Elysia, before I continue.
Well, no, I mean, I just want to say that I know it might be a minority, but I know other people who are in the same boat as Caitlin, and I've been surprised by people who I'm like, wait, you don't even know the major twist in like the original trilogy, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm surprised how many people that is true for. And I find myself feeling almost jealous of that perspective. Like, what would it be like to experience this story from a fresh perspective from the beginning even? And that's one of the main reasons why I really wanted to do this podcast. And this is one of the things that inspired this policy, is because I know that these people do exist, although this is not, like I said, it's not the only reason why I want to look at things like from this present timeline. I know, Caitlin, you're not alone.
Several thousand people downloaded our last Acolyte episode.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about this, you can't assume that all of those people are super fans like you. You know, I'm talking to the people who are writing and saying like, well, everybody knows this. I just think that you can't assume that everyone's as committed a fan as you. And, you know, there's a whole generation that saw the sequel trilogy and nothing else, right?
Uh-huh.
Because they went, oh, this sounds like a cool franchise, and they went in, and maybe they didn't go back, maybe because they were disappointed by the last movie, and but maybe they didn't go back and they didn't watch the original trilogy. Guys, it was in 1977. How many other movies from 1977 have you watched recently?
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying is
yeah.
I do think that there's a bit of original trilogy centrism that is not necessarily true for everybody. It is true for a lot of the fandom, but I don't think that you can say it's universal. And so I appreciate this take that, you know, it's not everybody has already seen everything, especially the animated stuff. My God, I mean, so many people have not watched the animated stuff where most of the lore is on screen.
Exactly. Yeah, and some of the greatest story arcs. So we got a reference to, I mean, I did say openly, Ahsoka has a good story arc in the Clone Wars. I think that's fine to say, but I'm not going to tell you who goes blind in a different series, you know, because that's a spoiler.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Justice for, all right, I won't do it again. I won't make you bleep it again.
But yeah, if you've skipped the books, if you've skipped the animated series, then you are also missing some really cool lore. But we're going to fix that together for those of you who are listening to the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast.
Yeah, maybe if I can elbow my way into the Phase 2 High Republic books.
Well, yeah, no,
podcast,
that's something
then,
actually, that is something I want to set up for the near future. It's going to be an upcoming flashback episode.
Let's do it. So are you going to do Phase 2 first?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Because that chronologically happens first.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll keep the outro short since not much has changed since a few days ago. So get your full House of the Dragon coverage on the Lorehounds and prep for Rings of Power on Rings and Rituals. And it sounds like we're getting a season wrap-up of The Boys on Radioactive Rambling soon.
Yep.
On the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast, do check out the Canon Ancient Myths episode. Oh, and I did get feedback today from Adam. Thank you. So he said that he did not get notifications on Podcast Addict either, which is the app that I use. And just, I don't know, you might have to turn it on Podcast Addict. I have mine set up to auto refresh every 8 hours. And so when it does that, I get a notification that says all the episodes that have been released in the past 8 hours, even if they're backdated. So I don't know.
Okay.
But that's just one thing. So I've decided that, like I said, that is clearly not how this works on most podcast players. So I'm going to try it a different way this week before the next episode of The Acolyte comes out. Watch out for a Star Wars Visions Sith Legends episode where I'm joined by two of my besties. One is a professional animator and the other is a Sith lover. And we're actually going to talk about 3 of the episodes from that international animated anthology series that are set in the Old Republic. And then we're also doing a separate episode. We're going to record them at the same time, but we're going to separate them into 2 episodes where we're talking about 2 more that are set during the High Republic era. And these are legends, of course, but there's some cool stuff to pick out of them. And yeah, see the show notes for information about which episodes are being covered. And then we'll see everyone next week for the finale. May it be many minutes long.
I'm sure it will be. Well, maybe not the episode, but our coverage will be.
Yeah. I've got some music lined up. Do you want to do the shout outs?
Oh, sure. Let's do it. All
right, let's see what we got. So again, rolling the dice here. Let's see what this is. All right.
Gnarls, Aaron K, Killer the Thriller, Dork of the Ninjas, Duve71, Captain Gingy 56, and Athena A are our Discord server boosters. Lore Masters, Samartian, Michael G, Michelle E, David W, Brian P, SC, Peter OH, Bettina W, Adam S, Nancy M, Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Gareth C, Eric F, Matthew M, Sarah M, DJ Miwa.
Oh, here we go.
I need more music.
Yeah.
Andra B, Kwang Yu, Deadeye Jedi Bob, Nathan T, Alex V, Aaron T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Dally V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, Kathy W, Stuart B, our new Supercast lore master, Jeffrey B, and Adrian. Thank you all for your support. Sorry for the silly voices. We're still trying out new sounds here.
Yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying our new musical takes on. I think it livens it up.
I think David said it on a recent podcast. He's like, look, if anyone's listening by now, they're here for the laughs. It was like 2 hours into our Hot D coverage.
I even did it on the interview with the vampire. I know you didn't listen to the end of that episode because of spoilers, but
I know.
I've
loaded it up. I'm ready to watch it.
Okay. All right. Awesome. I can't wait to hear what you think. Oh, it's so good. But anyway, at the end, I did some music with it. And then I said, see, guys, I did the music.
That's funny. Well, I'll listen to that eventually. That'll be fun. That was a great podcast. Everyone should go check that out.
Yes, definitely. You'll find that in the main Lorehounds feed. And the first part is spoiler free for people who haven't watched the show and you're like, I don't know if I want to watch a show. Listen to us talk about it and you can decide. All right. Well, thank you for all of you who are listening through to this point. It's been some great discussion. Thank you to everyone who's weighed in positive or negative about the spoiler policy, about the episode. We really, like John said earlier, this is the type of Star Wars discourse that we want,
Yeah. And only a Sith deals in absolutes. You can have nuanced feedback too. It's okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And thank you to this awesome community for showing us that.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we will see you all. I mean, I guess I'll see you on the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast in just a few days with that Star Wars Visions episode. And then we'll see you back in all the feeds for the finale wrap up. Just one more episode. All right. See you on the other side.
See ya. The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by The Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. And connect with us on Twitter at The Lorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening. Okay, David, this is where we're supposed to choose a side, green or black?
John, my soul is as black as night. Your turn.
I am black for life.
So we're not fighting? I thought this is where HBO wanted us to pick sides and fight and stuff.
Don't worry, I'm sure we'll find plenty to disagree about on the pod, but we seem to agree on one thing. We both really like this show.
The politics, the drama, the lore. It was made for the Lorehounds.
And since we just finished recapping season 1, we couldn't be more ready to defend our Black Queen in the Dance of the Dragons.
And with the season pass option in Supercast, listeners can get early ad-free access to each weekly scene-by-scene deep dive, plus our custom show guide with all the characters and connections. See you in the Lorehounds podcast feed each week for our Dragonfire hot, but probably positive, takes.
The Lorehounds House of the Dragon coverage is also safe for Team Green consumption. Side effects may include a deeper understanding of dragon lore, a hardened conflict with itself, and an inescapable urge to read the book Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. Dragon seeds may experience burning.